An Apache warrior arrived, urgently asking for milk. She nourished the infant and became the caretaker he desperately required. Stone Creek in West Texas during the autumn of 1879 was ablaze with the colors of sunset, the sky glowing like embers. The chill was quietly approaching across the arid plains. Inside a humble log cabin resting on the edge of Stone Creek, Clara May Thompson knelt beside the fireplace, gently encouraging a small flame to grow. The wind whispered through gaps in the window shutters. Draped over her dress was her late husband's flannel coat, her sleeves rolled up to reveal hands raw from chopping firewood earlier that day. She had just placed some dried juniper twigs onto the fire when a sudden knock interrupted her. The pounding was urgent, desperate, and unfamiliar. Clara May sat up straight. Another knock, louder this time. She reached for her rifle, standing near the door with her heart pounding fiercely. Then came a voice, hoarse and begging, saying, "Please give milk to my son, he is dying." She stood motionless for a moment before slowly unbolting the door. There on the porch was a tall Apache man with broad shoulders, his long hair pulled back with leather straps. His eyes were dark, unblinking. In his arms lay a fragile infant wrapped in a thin, soiled blanket. The child was barely breathing. His cracked lips and tightly closed eyes spoke of desperation. Behind the man, a group of townspeople had gathered, clutching lanterns and whispering fearfully. One woman hissed, "It is an Apache. Do not let him inside." But Clara May did not flinch. Her eyes remained fixed on the baby whose ribs were visible like ladder rungs beneath the blanket. She stepped forward and said, "Give him to me." The warrior hesitated, then she assured him, "I have milk. He will not survive out here." Their eyes met silently in understanding. She handed the child to her with such tenderness that it nearly broke her heart. Clara May Thompson carried the baby inside and settled by the fire. She unfastened the front of her dress, gently pulled her blouse to the side, and brought the baby's mouth to her breast. The infant's lips moved uncertainly at first, and then latched on. She exhaled with trembling breaths as the warmth of the baby's breath against her skin almost overwhelmed her. Tears began to fall quietly down her cheeks while the child started to nurse. The Apache man stayed kneeling by the door, perfectly still. The flickering firelight revealed the deep weariness carved into his face and the wound near his collarbone crusted with blood and grime. "You saved him," he whispered, his voice raw with emotion. "You saved us." Clara May Thompson offered no words, only held the child closer, rocking gently. The baby's tiny hands twitched slightly. She asked quietly, "What is his name?" "Kalen," he answered hesitantly. "Kalen Silentwater." "No," she said softly, correcting him about the baby. He paused, then spoke again. "He was born as Teo. We have not spoken his name since his mother passed away." Clara May nodded, her heart aching deeply. Behind them, a sudden gust of wind banged the shutters shut. Voices still echoed from outside, filled with anger and fear masked as righteousness. Clara May stood, still holding the child, and approached the open door. The townspeople watched from the shadows. Her voice was steady as she declared, "He is only a baby, and no child will starve on my doorstep." There was no response. One by one, the lanterns were turned away. Inside, Kalen Silentwater moved slowly. He carefully unwound a leather cord from around his neck. Attached to it was a single broad feather with dark-tipped ends. He extended it toward her. "This is a red-tailed hawk," he said. "In my tribe, it symbolizes protection for those who give life." Clara May looked first at the feather and then at him. "I did not do this for thanks," she said. He gave a quiet nod and then added softly, "It belongs to you now." She accepted it gently as if it could burn her fingers and placed it delicately next to the baby. Behind them the fire crackled. The child had stopped crying and his breathing had become more even. Clara May glanced at Kalen Silentwater and then down at the boy nestled against her chest. "I do not understand what this means," she whispered. "Neither do I," he replied in a low voice, "but he is breathing." And in that quiet moment the sharp edges of suspicion and sorrow softened just a little. Bathed in the dancing light of the hearth, a warrior and a widow sat silently together, the sound of a child nursing replacing the space where fear had once lived. They did not speak again that night, but something had begun between them, something that neither conflict nor rumors nor the harshness of winter could ever erase. A week later the days were growing shorter and the wind more biting. Clara May Thompson kept track of time no longer by the sun or moon, but by the sound of knocking on her door. Just after first light each morning, Kaylin Silentwater appeared, wrapped in a frayed woolen blanket and carrying the child whom Clara May had named Samuel. He never entered without being invited, but the child's softened cries seemed to open a door. His skin was no longer pale from thirst, and the tiny hands started reaching out. When he first caught sight of her face, Clara May opened her arms, and the child instantly nestled against her chest as if he had always been there. "You named him," Kaylin said softly one morning as he watched her feed the boy in the rocking chair by the fire. "I needed to call him something," she replied, gently brushing the baby's soft black hair with her fingertips. "Samuel means gift of God." "It feels fitting, does it not?" Kaylin did not meet her eyes, but gave a slight nod in response. Later that morning, Clara May stirred a pot of pinto beans with smoked venison simmering over the fire, carefully cutting dried chili into the bubbling stew. She baked cornbread sweetened with wild honey she had traded for with a passing merchant. When Kaylin returned that afternoon to take Samuel, she wrapped 2 slices of the cornbread in cloth and handed it to him for the journey. "You owe me nothing more," she said, watching him hesitate. "I do not give to be repaid," she answered firmly. "I give because he is hungry." "And you are too," he observed quietly. He accepted the gift with a small nod, his gaze briefly flickering toward the boy who was now curled up in a makeshift cradle Clara May had fashioned from a drawer lined with wool. That evening, long after the fire had died down and the child was sound asleep, Clara May stood by the window, sipping the last of her tea. The moon hung like silver over the plains as her eyes scanned the darkness, expecting nothing but the shapes of trees and wind-worn hills. Yet beneath the twisted outline of a cottonwood, Kaylin stood silently, watching. She did not light a lamp. She did not call out to him, yet her breath caught sharply in her throat, not from fear but something else, a sense of protection and presence. The following morning, after Kaylin had taken Samuel and disappeared into the hills, Clara May went to fetch water from the well. Upon returning, she noticed a small object resting beside the cradle. Picking it up with care, she found it was a tiny horse no longer than her palm, carved from dark cedar. Its legs were bent as though it were caught mid-gallop, manes flowing with an imagined breeze. Every curve was meticulous. Its shape was both graceful and strong. Across its back lay a slender leather strip resembling a saddle too small to be seen clearly. Turning it over, she found on its belly, carefully engraved, the words, "So he will remember his courage always." Clara May pressed her hand over her heart as the baby in the cradle beside her stirred, letting out soft gurgles. Later that evening, when Kaylin returned, Clara May met him at the door. Holding up the carved horse, she said, "You made this." "Yes," he replied simply. "It is beautiful." "It is Apache," he explained. "The horse represents freedom and strength. Our people ride with the sky. My son must know this, even if he grows up among your people." Clara May looked at him silently for a long moment, then stepped aside. "You may come in," she said quietly. He paused for a moment before entering. For the first time he sat on the floor near the hearth while Clara May cradled the baby. They remained quiet for a long while as the fire popped softly. Clara May glanced at him, then back to Samuel, and whispered, "You are not what they say." "I am shaped by the land," Kaylin Silentwater responded, "but I have never harmed your people, not even once." She gave a slow nod, signaling her trust. Outside, the coyotes' cries echoed through the night. Inside, a flame flickered beyond the hearth, embodying more than just warmth. Trust had quietly taken root, not through grand speeches or promises, but through small, unspoken gestures. A bowl of soup, a carved horse, a man who stood in shadow not to menace but to protect, and a woman who was beginning to realize that her home was not only warmer but richer with something she feared lost before, family. The fire had dwindled low, while the wind scraped at the cabin walls like a wild creature attempting to enter. Clara May stirred the glowing embers with the iron poker, watching them pulse from bright red to faint ash. Kaylin sat opposite her, knees bent, hands resting easily on them. Samuel slept peacefully in the cradle nestled between them, one tiny hand clutching the carved horse. Clara May broke the silence first. "He had red hair," she whispered barely above the wind. "My son Daniel, just a flicker of it, like a leaf burning in autumn. He was 6 weeks old when the fever struck." Kaylin said nothing, his gaze fixed on her. "I tried everything. Cool cloths, willow bark tea. I held him close to my skin for hours, hoping my warmth could chase away the cold." She looked deep into the flames. It did not help. The quiet stretched again. "My husband left 3 months later," she added, saying he could not live in a house that felt like a tomb. The land remained still, unmoved. Slowly he reached into the pouch tied at his waist and pulled out something wrapped in deer hide. Without a word, he handed it to her. Clara May carefully unfolded the cloth. Inside was a square piece of rough linen marked by years. At its center, an embroidered sun with long, slender rays gleamed in golden thread. The stitching was imperfect but clearly made with great care by a loving hand. "My wife," Kaylin said quietly, his voice steady. "She created this for our son's naming day. He never got to have it. Soldiers came the following full moon. She died protecting him, both gone before the earth warmed once more." Clara May held the cloth gently, as if it could shatter like glass. "In our tribe," Kaylin went on, "healing comes where words fail. That is what she told me once." Clara May swallowed hard, then added, "And now you carry the sun." Kaylin's jaw tightened. "Sometimes I feel I carry only shadow." She reached over the cradle, fingers lightly touching his. "You brought him to me." She said he was light. He looked down at their hands, then back at the sleeping boy. "I was afraid you would turn us away. I feared I had nothing left to offer." The fire popped, sending sparks into the air. They remained like that, two souls weighed down by grief but no longer broken. Clara May folded the cloth once more with care and slipped it into her skirt's folds. "I will keep it safe," she whispered. "I promise." Kaylin nodded. As the wind howled outside the wooden walls, Clara May leaned back against the beam behind her. Kaylin shifted to add another log to the fire. They did not speak again that night because no words were needed. Some silences held the weight of entire lifetimes, and in the quiet moments between them, something delicate yet resilient began to emerge. It was taking root, something unnamed but starting to feel like healing. The news spread quickly through Stone Creek. By the 4th day, Clara May Thompson could sense it in the way people hesitated along the dirt road near her cabin and in the whispers that floated just loud enough to be more than wind. "They say she is caring for a Redskins baby, not just nursing but raising him as if he were her own. They say she has lost her mind." These words drifted like smoke throughout the town, leaving a stain wherever they lingered. That afternoon the sound of hooves disrupted the stillness. Clara May was inside, holding Samuel close, when she suddenly heard heavy footsteps pounding the dry ground outside and a harsh voice calling her name with urgency and anger. "Clara May Thompson, come out here right now." She stepped onto the porch. Samuel snug in her arms, one tiny mouth nuzzling softly against her shoulder. The air was heavy with the scent of hay and dust. 6 men stood in her yard. At the front was Silas Croft, owner of the feed store, fists clenched and face flushed with fury. Behind him stood Jebediah Stone, Phineas Lowe, and 3 others Clara May barely recognized, rifles slung across their backs, ready. "You are betraying your own," Silas growled, his voice shaking with rage. "Harboring that Apache, feeding his child? Do you even recall what they have done here? Have you forgotten the raids, the bloodshed?" Clara May gazed down at Samuel's sleeping face, pale and innocent. "I remember loss," she whispered softly. "I do not need a reminder of what it looks like." Jebediah shouted out defiantly, "He is not one of us." That baby is not one of us, he is a child, Clara May responded calmly. And he is hungry. She stepped down barefoot onto the warm earth and positioned herself squarely in front of the assembly. The baby stirred, stretching a tiny hand. Without hesitation, Clara May adjusted her shawl, cradled Samuel in her arms, and brought him to her breast. A ripple of gasps swept through the men like a chilling breeze, their rifles shaking with surprise. Clara May raised her chin, resolute, saying, "This child is not your enemy, but you are sounding like mine." Silence fell heavily, the air thick and thunderous. Slow, deliberate footsteps approached along the side road. Clara May watched with weariness and tension as Martha Hayes, widow of the town's first preacher, a sharp-eyed and lively woman, came into view. She carried a small covered pot heavy in her hands and did not speak while crossing the yard. She passed through the circle of men, ignoring their glances and murmurs, and placed the pot gently on the front step. "Chicken stew," she said softly, "with barley for the baby and the mother." She looked at Clara May, then at Samuel. "Feed him. That is what mothers do." Then she turned and walked back down the road, head held high and unafraid. The silence that followed felt heavier than the midday sun. Silas spat into the dirt. "It is not finished," he whispered with a low voice, then turned abruptly and stormed away. The other men followed, their boots kicking up dust, leaving only the pot and Clara May Thompson's defiant stance behind. Clara May remained standing long after they had gone. Samuel was still nursing his tiny fingers, curling them into her shawl. The pot of stew warmed in the fading sunlight. When he was done, she carefully wrapped Samuel and brought the pot indoors. The stew remained warm that evening when Caelan Silent Water returned. She presented him a bowl silently. He sat near the flickering lamp, his eyes steady and cautious as he accepted her offering. The cabin smelled of broth and barley, a delicate atmosphere present in every quiet pause. He ate slowly and quietly. When finished, he set the bowl down and looked at her. "Did they come?" he asked softly. "They left," she replied gently. His gaze shifted toward the cradle where Samuel now slept soundly. "And the woman?" he inquired. Clara May smiled, tired but determined. A stew and a few kind words. Caelan nodded once, a deep understanding shining in his eyes. Kindness is stronger than fear, but it must be chosen. She placed her hand over his. His fingers closed around hers warmly and surprisingly tenderly, bridging the gap between two worlds. The fire crackled softly behind them, embers dancing against the dark cabin walls and beyond. Outside those walls, Stone Creek still watched, its judgment hovering like a restless spirit. But inside, a mother, a child, and a man shaped by war sat together in a fragile bond, held by the quiet bravery to choose love over fear. They arrived just in time. As dusk faded and the last vestiges of light thinned over the dry grass, the wind began to shift. Clara May sensed it deeply. The crickets fell silent, and Samuel stirred in his cradle, letting out a soft whimper not born of hunger, but from something far more profound, as though he too felt the trembling beneath the ground. Caelan was by the fire, sharpening a tool blade when he paused, raised his head, and listened intently. Boots, horses, voices approached, then came a pounding on the door. "Clara May Thompson, you have one chance. Open up." Clara May rose from her chair, her heart pounding against her ribs like a captive bird. Caelan was already at the door, tall and still. "No," Clara May whispered, not with fear but with quiet resolve, placing her hand on his back. "Let me open it." Caelan stepped aside and she unlaced the door, pulling it open to reveal Silas Croft, surrounded by 6 men including Jasper Kane, whose long rifle hung over his chest, his face twisted with a blend of anger and righteous fury. "I warned you," Silas said, eyes flicking between Clara May and the shadow behind her. "Now you have left us no choice." Jasper came forward, his hand resting on an Apache and the boy. Clara May did not flinch. Caelan stepped into the doorway. He bore no weapons on his belt, no blade in his hand, yet his presence was as unyielding as steel. "You do not belong here," Silas declared. "You belong neither to her nor to that child." Kalen met his gaze and remained silent. That quiet, complete and unwavering was more unsettling than 100 shouted threats. Jasper's lip curled as he sneered, "Say it. Are you prepared to confront what lies ahead, or are you too fearful to face it?" Kalen remained silent as he took a single step forward until he stood between Clara May Thompson and the men. His chest rose steadily, and his gaze never wavered from theirs. Jasper acted swiftly, lunging forward, possibly to take the child or to force his way past Kalen. However, before Jasper's hand reached the doorway, Kalen seized his wrist with one unwavering hand and twisted it downward, applying enough pressure to bring Jasper to his knees. The rifle fell from his grip with a clatter. The others tensed but stayed frozen under Kalen's intense stare. "You do not own this child," Kalen said softly yet firmly, "and you never will." He glanced at Clara May Thompson and then back to Kalen. "She is his mother, and I am his father," Kalen stated with quiet conviction. Clara May's breath caught as a fire crackled behind them, but no one moved. Jasper pulled his arm back, furious, yet he did not rise. Silas took a step forward but hesitated. His mouth opened, closed, and then opened again. "You will regret this," he hissed. "All of you." Clara May straightened, her voice steady. "You are not the law here, Mr. Croft, and neither is your fear." Silas stared at her, then at Kalen before turning away. "Let's go." One by one, the men followed Jasper, who was last, rubbing his wrist and muttering curses quietly. Once they had left, Clara May closed the door slowly and leaned against it. Kalen picked up the dropped rifle and placed it carefully against the wall. "Are you hurt?" Clara May asked. "No," he replied calmly. Clara May looked at the man who had neither drawn a weapon nor shouted or threatened, feeling a mix of relief and awe. He remained firm with a calmness earned through countless trials. "Did you really say that?" she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Is it true?" Kalen's gaze softened. "Which part?" "That I am his mother." Kalen reached toward the cradle. Samuel shifted slightly, uttered a faint sound, then drifted back to sleep. "You fed him, you held him, you stayed," Kalen said softly. "No bloodline defines you more than being his mother." She asked, "Was I ready to die for him?" He replied firmly, "Then yes, I am his father." There stood the three of them, a woman who once mourned in solitude, a man believing his people's tale had ended, and a child born amid flames, being nurtured by those who chose love instead of heritage. Outside, the wind altered its course once more, yet inside, the atmosphere remained calm. Kalen, warrior of the Apache, laid his hand gently on Clara May Thompson's shoulder, silently conveying, "We do not flee from fire, we face it as one." Above the ridge, the moon climbed high, casting a silver glow over the small cabin that had become more than mere refuge. The fire inside glowed low but unwavering, filling the room with warm amber light. Clara May stood barefoot beneath the wooden beam spanning the ceiling. In her hand was the carving knife Kalen had given her days before. She held it firmly, her other hand guiding the blade carefully into the wood. Letter by letter, slow and steady, she whispered aloud the name Samuel, etching it deeply into the grain of the beam above the cradle, above the place where he lay. Now he slept with his small fists clenched and his breathing slow and steady, while she whispered, "Now the walls will hold memory as well." Behind her, Kalen shifted in the chair near the fireplace, his face pale and glistening with sweat. Blood had soaked the cloth wrapped around his thigh where the deer had struck him in a frantic final struggle. Despite everything, he had carried the injured animal back. Clara May moved toward him, knelt down, untied the bloodied bandage, and dipped a clean cloth into the nearby bowl of boiled water. She worked carefully and gently, her hands steady even though her chest trembled slightly. "You should have waited," she said, softly pressing the rag against the wound. "You should have let me go first." "I have hunted ever since I could walk," he answered. "The deer would not have waited for you." She chuckled quietly, calling him stubborn. He stayed silent, but a faint smile tugged at his lips. She finished cleaning the injury and wrapped it anew with fresh cloth. Her fingers lingered on his skin, sensing the heat of the fever beginning to rise. "Kaelin," she spoke softly. He looked down at her, his eyes deepened in the firelight. "I am not afraid to love you," she confessed. "Not any more." Something inside him shifted. His rough and strong hand lifted to rest over hers on his leg. "You named my son," he murmured, voice thick with more than just pain. "You gave us both a place to belong." Clara May swallowed hard, the pain catching her voice. "Kaelin," she started, but he was already. Reaching around his neck, he untied a cord adorned with small worn beads and handed it to her. It was a necklace woven from corn kernels, dried and polished to a gentle golden glow, threaded among pieces of turquoise and carved wood. At the center lay a single white seed, round and flawless. "This is for you," he said, "so the land will remember you belong to it now." Clara May gazed at the necklace, breathless. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "What does it signify in our tribe?" Kaelin replied, "Corn means life. It grows from the earth, nourishes the people, and links the past to the present. This one," he touched the white seed, "is rare. It stands for blessing and continuity." She wrapped her fingers around it and pressed it to her heart. "And you would give me this?" she asked. He nodded gently. "You are not only feeding my child, but planting something that will endure beyond both of us." Clara May's eyes brimmed with tears. "Then I will wear it proudly," she said, placing the necklace over her head. It settled against her collarbone, warm from his touch, light yet full of meaning. Outside, the wind whispered through the grasses, and Samuel shifted in his sleep before settling again. Kaelin reclined, his breathing slowing as the fever lessened. Clara May curled up on the floor beside him, her head resting softly against his knee. "We will plant in spring, corn, beans, squash, the three sisters, like your people grow," she murmured. He looked down at her, a tender expression softening his face. "And Samuel will thrive alongside them?" She smiled. "I carved his name into the beam tonight," she whispered, "so this home will always remember." Kaelin closed his eyes. It already does. They sat quietly, the fire crackling gently, moonlight filtering through the window to meet the soft cadence of breath, hope, and healing. Clara May closed her eyes, fingers gripping the necklace resting on her neck, and somewhere deep inside her spirit something had taken root, not just love, but a true sense of belonging. Tomorrow the world might knock again with its harsh judgments and fears, yet tonight there was only warmth, the name etched into the wood above them, and the certainty that a new family had formed, not by blood, but through bravery, and it would never be erased, not by the land, the stars, nor the hearts that had chosen it. The sun was nearly set when Martha's warning arrived. "They are coming tonight. Silas will not delay." Clara May's heart raced as she hurriedly gathered a knapsack, Samuel's blankets, a small loaf of bread, and some jerky, while Kaelin secured a strong leather sling around the baby's cradle. Moonlight poured through their cabin's doorway, fragile but steady, as they slipped out together. Clara May held Samuel close. Kaelin crouched low with his rifle, and they moved silently toward the edge of the timberline, feet crunching dry grass. The forest stood before them like a cathedral of shadowed trunks and silence. Kaelin guided them deeper, older trees swallowing sound and wrapping them in quiet. In the distance, owls hooted as Samuel whimpered softly once. Clara May silenced him gently, filling his lungs with hope. They arrived at the creek, which was partially frozen during the season, a shimmering silver ribbon weaving through the stones. Kaelin paused there and signaled Clara May to follow a steep trail climbing out of the valley. Samuel drifted into a light sleep, nestled closely against Clara May's chest. They ascended, but just beyond the creek, moonlight gleamed off a rifle barrel. Numerous figures, tense and alert, awaited on the riverbank, Silas and his men. They had laid a trap. Kaelin pushed Clara May back against a moss-covered stump, rifle raised, his gaze sharp. He whispered, "Stay here. Protect him." Silas advanced, his sneer illuminated in the lantern's glow. He shouted, Come on out, Apache, the white woman and the brat. We will send you packing. Kalen's knuckles grew white as he gripped the rifle tightly. Clara May held Samuel close, her eyes shut tightly, her heartbeat pounding loudly. She thought of the turquoise necklaces, the carved name above, the life they were quietly forging. Lost in the moment, Clara May felt her bravery swell like the sunrise. Kalen straightened, his shoulders tense, rifle unwavering, his face fierce. A faint breeze rustled through the branches, and then suddenly a shot rang out. It did not come from Silas's men, but from behind Kalen and Clara May. A bright flare from a torch lit up a tall figure stepping onto the bank, Reverend Alistair Finch, followed by a man wearing a federal badge. "Marshal Reeves," he announced briskly. "Federal Marshal." Clara May blinked through her tears as Kalen slowly lowered his weapon, tired but filled with hope. Reverend Finch moved forward, changing the entire atmosphere. A voice rang out, "Step back, Silas, this family is under protection." Silas narrowed his eyes at them, shock and rage contorting his face. "This land belongs to the Rangers. They lost that conflict," the marshal responded firmly. "This boy and his mother and his father are guarded by federal law. Take another step and you challenge the United States." A low murmur spread among the men. Silas spat onto the dirt. "We will remember this," he vowed. "You have not seen the last of us." The marshal raised his hand. "Leave immediately and take this as your sole warning." Silas shot a glare at Clara May and then at Kalen before sneering one. "Last time." He signaled his men and they withdrew, their boots pounding the earth, lanterns flickering and fading into the night. Kalen stepped forward with dignity, drawing a deep breath. Clara May looked upward to find Silas standing still as the moonlight fully returned, the forest itself seeming to exhale. Reverend Finch came near, his coat dusted with leaves and frost. "Are they injured?" he asked, his urgency softening. Kalen knelt beside the creek under the full moon's glow, inspecting his left thigh where torn fabric hung. It had been a full year since that night by the creek where blood and law mingled beneath the moon. Seasons turned over the red hills of Stone Creek, and Clara May's cabin had grown not just in walls but in spirit. A garden blossomed behind it now, laughter spilling from the porch each morning. Clara May transformed the old smokehouse into a one-room schoolhouse, welcoming half a dozen children, both Apache and settlers. They sat side by side on benches that she and Kalen had crafted together. She taught them letters traced in chalk, numbers marked in the dirt, and the art of speaking to each other with kindness at the close of each day. Samuel toddled eagerly toward them, proud to present his painted stones or awkward sketches. Inside their home, a quiet world carved in silence, Kalen spent his days shaping wood from tall pines he had cut down himself, smoothing the surface with hands that once only knew how to wield weapons. The cradle he built was solid, polished, and beautiful. On its side, he carefully inscribed Apache symbols representing wind, protection, and fresh beginnings. One peaceful Sunday morning, he placed the cradle beside Clara May's bed, his dark eyes shining with quiet pride. That evening, as stars pierced the night sky, Kalen led Clara May to the fire circle behind their home. Strings of paper lanterns swayed gently from tree to tree, and wildflowers braided with sage rested in baskets, their gentle aroma rising with the warm air. Samuel sat on Martha Hayes's lap, playfully tangled with a ribbon. Clara May glanced at Kalen, who knelt on one knee. Opening his palm, he revealed a silver ring etched with Apache words that shimmered in the firelight. He said gently, "You speak with your heart, Clara May. Will you live with me, not as mine, but as my equal?" Clara May's breath caught, and she knelt beside him, her arms wrapping around his neck as she pulled him close. "I am already home," she whispered. Silence swept over the guests until Reverend Finch joyfully stepped forward, not as a minister, but as a witness. Martha lit the first lantern, and their ceremony was modest. Clara May Thompson wore a dress carefully crafted by Apache women. Kalen Silent Water had quietly brought it from the hills. Its beadwork featured gentle shades of blue and white, reflecting the sky above. Around her waist was a sash intricately woven with Kalen's tribal symbols. Her hair fell freely, adorned with wildflowers. They stood beneath a handmade wooden arch wrapped in untamed vines. No promises were spoken. Instead, their hands joined in the flickering firelight. Children scattered petals while lanterns ascended, glowing like distant stars. Drawn to witness this moment, they were no longer strangers or fugitives. As the final lantern drifted upwards, Kaelin led Clara May indoors. There, reaching up to the sturdy crossbeam above their hearth, he used his carving knife to inscribe two names side by side, Clara May Thompson and Samuel Silentwater. Stepping back, he met her gaze and said, "This is our home now." Clara May traced the carved letters, feeling the grooves beneath her fingertips. The simplicity held a permanence, a symbol not just of individuals, but of belonging. Outside, the lanterns continued to gleam softly. Inside, laughter and comfort filled the space beneath the boundless Texas sky. Two hearts, once broken and guarded, had chosen not merely to endure, but to share a life together. If this story touched your soul, if the power of love overcoming fear resonated with you, or if you saw yourself in the glow of two spirits picking each other despite all odds, then we invite you to stay a little longer. Subscribe to Frontier Stories for more heartfelt tales like this one. Where dusty paths guide us to unforeseen connections, where quiet moments speak louder than any conversation, and where not even the toughest boundaries can halt love's force. There are countless tales drifting in the breeze waiting to be discovered. Join us on this journey.